On my graduation day, my parents told me I needed to hand over my diploma to my brother since he deserved it more. I laughed and said, "That's not how this works." They started screaming when the dean called my name and announced I grew up in a household where favoritism wasn't just present, it was law. My younger brother, James, was the sun, the moon, and the stars in my parents' eyes. He could do no wrong. When he got into trouble at school, it was the teacher's fault. When he wrecked his first car, they bought him another one. Meanwhile, I was expected to be the responsible one, the one who didn't need attention, praise, or apparently basic human decency. But this took it to a whole new level. Let's rewind a bit. I worked my ass off in school, straight A's, extracurriculars, part-time jobs to save up for college, everything I could do to secure a future for myself. Meanwhile, James? He was failing half his classes, spending nights out partying, and generally being a walking disaster. Still, my parents worshipped him. I would hear them whispering about how he was so special and how his potential just needed to be unlocked. Meanwhile, when I asked for help with tuition, I was told, "You're smart, you'll figure it out." Fine, I did. I got scholarships, I took on more work, I made it happen. Fast forward to my college graduation, a massive milestone. I had double majored, graduated summa cum laude, and even landed a job offer months before finishing my last semester. I was proud of myself, not that my parents ever asked about my achievements. Then came the moment that still makes my blood boil. We were in the auditorium moments before the ceremony started. My parents and James sat beside me, stiff and formal, like they were there out of obligation. I figured they were just being their usual selves. Then my mom leaned in and whispered, "After you get your diploma, you need to hand it to James." I blinked. "What? You heard me," she said, looking at me like I was stupid. "James deserves it more than you do." I laughed, not a nervous laugh, a real, genuine laugh because, surely this was a joke. But no, she was serious. My dad, ever the enforcer of my mother's delusions, nodded. "It'll mean so much to him," he said, voice dripping with that fake, patronizing tone I hated. "You already have a job, you don't need the validation, but he does. This could be the push he needs to turn his life around." I was still stunned, but I managed to say, "That's not how this works." James, who up until that point had been scrolling on his phone, smirked. "Come on, don't be selfish. It's just a piece of paper," my hands clenched into fists. Just a piece of paper? No, this was 4 years of sleepless nights. This was missed parties, missed vacations, skipped meals to afford books. This was blood, sweat, and sacrifice, and they wanted me to hand it over like some participation trophy. Before I could respond, the ceremony started. I sat there, boiling, as the names were called. I barely heard a thing until my name. I stood, walked to the stage. My heart was pounding, but I held my head high. I shook the dean's hand and took my diploma. Then he smiled, turned to the audience, and said, "I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge something truly special today. This graduate has not only achieved the highest academic honors in their department, but they have also been awarded a full-ride scholarship for their master's degree." The auditorium erupted in applause. I saw my parents' faces drop. James's mouth literally fell open. And then the final blow. The dean said, "This is an incredibly rare achievement. Let's give another round of applause." People stood, cheered. I felt invincible. I turned to look at my parents and brother. Their expressions were priceless. I walked off stage and back to my seat, feeling like I was floating. My parents were stiff as statues. James looked like he wanted to throw something. When I sat down, my mom hissed, "You humiliated us." I didn't look at her. I just smiled and whispered, "You did that to yourselves." That should have been the end of it, but no. My parents don't give up that easily. They ambushed me after the ceremony. My mom was practically vibrating with rage. "You need to give the diploma to James." The first tucked it under my arm. "You're out of your mind. My dad's face turned an ugly shade of red. "We have done everything for you, and this is how you repay us? Everything for me?" I asked, incredulous. "You mean like how you refused to help me pay for college? Or how you ignored me for 22 years while treating James like a king?" James finally spoke up. "You're being dramatic." That set me off. "Dramatic? Dramatic? Do you have any idea what I had to do to get here while you partied and pissed away every opportunity? I was working my ass off, and now you all seriously think I should just give you my diploma?" Silence. I shook my head. "You don't deserve it. None of you do." Then I turned and walked away. I ignored their calls. I ignored the texts. I even ignored the passive-aggressive Facebook posts from my mom about how some children are so ungrateful. Then the real revenge began. I blocked them, all of them. I moved across the country. I legally changed my last name so they couldn't claim any of my future achievements. And the best part? I sent James a picture of my master's diploma when I got it, along with a simple message, still just a piece of paper. For a while, my life was peaceful. I had cut my family off, moved across the country, and built a future for myself. No more manipulation, no more being treated like a second-class citizen in my own family. Then, out of nowhere, I got another email from my mom. At first, I almost deleted it without opening it. But something about the subject line made me pause. "Your father is sick." I don't know why I opened it, maybe some old habit of guilt, maybe curiosity, but the moment I read it, I wished I hadn't. It was long and full of dramatic nonsense. My dad had been diagnosed with some kind of heart condition, and according to my mom, this family needs to be together in difficult times. Then came the real kicker. James is struggling with all of this. He really needs you right now. I closed my laptop so fast, I nearly cracked the screen. James needs me? James, the same brother who had never lifted a damn finger for me, who had laughed when Mom and Dad demanded I hand over my diploma, like it was some kind of party favor? Nope, not my problem. I deleted the email and went on with my life, or at least I tried to. Because a week later, I got home from work, and there was someone sitting on my apartment steps. James. An unwanted reunion. I froze. How the hell did he find me? He stood up, looking like a mess, unshaven, dressed like he had just rolled out of bed, and holding a Starbucks cup like it was the only thing keeping him alive. "What the hell are you doing here?" I asked. He smirked. That same stupid smirk he always had when he wanted something. "Nice place. Expensive." Guess all that hard work paid off. I ignored the jab. "How did you find me?" "Mom, of course." I let out a breath, forcing myself to stay calm. "What do you want?" James shrugged, like he hadn't just shown up unannounced 3 states away from where he lived. "Look, Dad's really sick. He might not make it. Mom's a mess. She's been crying for weeks. You know how she gets." I crossed my arms. "Not my problem." His jaw tensed. "You're seriously still holding a grudge?" I laughed. "A grudge? A grudge, James? You and our parents treated me like I was disposable for 2 decades, and now you think you can just show up and guilt-trip me into pretending we're a happy family?" He sighed, rubbing his face like he was exhausted. "Look, I didn't come here to fight. I came because Mom needs money." There it was. I let out a sharp, humorless laugh. "You're joking. She's drowning in medical bills. Dad's treatments are expensive. The insurance isn't covering everything, and they're talking about taking out loans." I told them. "You told them what?" I snapped. "That I'd pay for it? That I'd fix all their problems?" His silence was answer enough. I shook my head, disgusted. "Let me get this straight. They spent years ignoring me, belittling me, treating you like royalty, and now, when they need money, suddenly, I exist?" "Jesus, it's not like that," he muttered. "Then what is it like, James?" The first shot back. "Tell me, what do they say about me now? Do they even know how hard I had to fight to get where I am? Or am I still just selfish because I didn't hand my future over to you on a silver platter? James sighed, looking away. For the first time, he seemed uncomfortable. They think you should help because you can, he admitted. Because you're the successful one now? That hit me like a punch to the gut, not because it hurt, but because it was so damn predictable. I took a slow breath, forcing myself to stay calm. I see. And what about you? What are you doing to help? He shrugged. I'm trying to find work. I narrowed my eyes. Trying? So you don't have a job? He shifted uncomfortably. Not right now, no. Typical. I smiled coldly. So let me get this straight. You, the favorite child who never had to lift a damn finger your entire life, are still unemployed, still mooching off Mom and Dad, and still expecting me to fix your messes? He didn't deny it. I shook my head. Get the hell out of here, James. The first turn to unlock my door, but then he dropped a bomb. If you don't help, they might lose the house. I froze. And just like that, it all clicked a bigger game. This wasn't just about Dad being sick. This was about money. They didn't just want help with the medical bills. They were in deep financial trouble, probably had been for a while, and now they were desperate. I turned slowly. Let me guess. Dad didn't save anything, did he? Mom spent every dime she had keeping you afloat. And now there's nothing left? James said nothing. I laughed, shaking my head. This is karma. Every single decision they made led to this. He stepped forward, looking serious now. So what? You're just going to let them lose everything? I looked him dead in the eye. Let me lose everything? I walked inside, and this time, I locked the door behind me. That night, I couldn't sleep, not because I felt guilty I didn't, but because I knew this wasn't over. James never showed up unless there was a plan. And something told me my parents weren't just asking for money, they were expecting it. And if I didn't play this right, they were going to try and take it anyway. For a while, things were quiet. Too quiet. James left after that night, but I knew it wasn't over. My parents weren't the kind of people to just accept consequences. They had spent their entire lives manipulating situations to get their way, and something told me they were about to try one last move. Then, about a month later, it happened. I got a letter from a lawyer. At first, I thought it was some mistake, maybe junk mail, but when I opened it, my stomach dropped. It was a legal notice from my parents. They were suing me for what? Emotional damages and financial abandonment. I had to read it 3 times because it was so absurd I thought I was hallucinating. My parents were actually trying to take me to court because I had refused to provide financial assistance despite being in a position to do so. They had listed things like unpaid medical expenses and lack of familial support as grounds for compensation. I wanted to laugh. I wanted to scream. I wanted to drive straight to their house and throw the letter in their faces. But I didn't. Instead, I called a lawyer. I got on the phone with my attorney, a sharp-as-hell woman named Claire. She read over the letter and laughed out loud. This isn't going to hold up in court, she said. It's nonsense. You're not financially responsible for them just because you're their kid. So what do? I asked. Well, we could just wait it out and let a judge dismiss it, she said. She hesitated. I leaned forward. Or what? You could go on the offensive, I grinned. Tell me more. Claire explained that if we really wanted to shut this down, we could dig into their financials. If they were deep in debt, lying on forms, or committing any kind of fraud, we could not only get the lawsuit dismissed, but possibly turn it back on them. I had never been one for revenge before, but after everything they put me through, I was more than ready. Claire started pulling records, and oh, it was a gold mine. Turns out my parents had been living a financial lie for years. They had taken out multiple loans they never paid back. They had racked up credit card debt in the hundreds of thousands. They had refinanced the house so many times it barely had any equity left. And the kicker? They had been filing for financial aid using my name. Claire found that they had used my social security number to try and take out a loan, one that had been denied because I had already secured my own student loans and scholarships. They were trying to steal my financial identity. I felt sick. James had said they were going to lose the house. Now I understood why. It wasn't just about Dad's medical bills. It was because they had spent every single dollar. They had like money would never run out. And now they were desperate. Desperate enough to try and sue their own child. We built a case against them. Claire helped me file a counter lawsuit for fraud and identity theft. And just like that, my parents' stupid attempt to manipulate me backfired. They were about to lose way more than just their lawsuit. A few weeks later, James called. I let it go to voicemail. Then he texted me. "What the hell did you do?" I smirked. He called again. This time, I answered. "Did you seriously sue Mom and Dad?" he demanded. I leaned back in my chair. Yep. He was furious. "You're ruining everything," he yelled. "They're talking about bankruptcy." "They might lose everything," I laughed. "They did that to themselves." "Are you serious right now?" he snapped. "They're our parents." "They were never my parents," I said coldly. Not in the way that mattered. He was breathing hard, angry, desperate. "You don't get it," he said. "You're putting us all in danger." I froze. What the hell does that mean? James didn't answer right away, and then he whispered something that sent a chill down my spine. "They borrowed money from the wrong people." My stomach dropped. "James," I said slowly, "who did they borrow from?" Silence. Then, quietly, "I think they're in with the wrong kind of people." I gripped the phone tighter. "You mean loan sharks?" "Not just loan sharks," he said. "Worse, people who don't care about the law." I stood up. This wasn't just about money anymore. This was about something bigger. And suddenly I realized I might have just started a war I wasn't ready for. James's words echoed in my head. They borrowed money from the wrong people. I paced my apartment, my mind racing. I had assumed my parents were just financially irresponsible, not entangled with criminals. "James," I said, forcing my voice to stay calm, "who exactly did they borrow from?" More silence. Then, very quietly, he muttered a name I recognized, not because I had ever met the guy, but because I had seen it on the news. A man linked to fraud schemes, extortion, and unofficial debt collection that had turned violent. My parents, in their infinite wisdom, had apparently taken out loans from an actual criminal, and now they were on the hook for money they couldn't pay back. I didn't want to go back, but I also couldn't ignore the feeling in my gut telling me this was going to spiral out of control. So I booked a flight. When I landed, I went straight to my parents' house. The place looked worse than I remembered. The once pristine lawn was overgrown. The driveway had cracks in it. The mailbox was missing. When I knocked on the door, it took a full minute before my mom opened it. She looked terrible, bags under her eyes, hair unbrushed, clothes wrinkled. For a moment, she just stared at me, stunned. Then, instead of a greeting, she snapped, "Why are you here?" Not hello, not we missed you, not even a fake performative hug, just hostility. I stepped inside without asking. "I need to talk to Dad," she scoffed. "You've done enough, don't you think?" I ignored her and walked into the living room, and there he was, my father, a man who had never once said he was proud of me. He looked old, weaker than I remembered, thinner. There was a cane beside him, and when he turned to see me, his expression hardened. "So the prodigal child returns," he muttered. I folded my arms. "Cut the crap, Dad. We need to talk about the people you owe money to." That got his attention. He sat up straighter, glancing toward my mother, who looked panicked. "There's nothing to talk about," he said. I laughed. "Oh, really?" Because James seemed to think there was. At the mention of his name, my mom flinched. James was here? And suddenly, I realized something they were afraid. Not of me, of him. James walked in just then, his face tight with frustration. "Why the hell did you come back?" he hissed. "To fix the mess you all made," I shot back. "Tell me the truth. How much do they owe?" James's eyes darted toward my father, then my mother. Nobody spoke. And that's when it clicked James owed the money, not just my parents. Him! I turned to my mom. Did you lie to me? She swallowed hard, looked away. James rubbed his face and muttered, You wouldn't understand. I snapped. I wouldn't understand? I broke my back to build a life because none of you ever supported me. Meanwhile, you partied, failed out of school, and somehow managed to get so deep in debt you turned to a goddamn criminal for help. James looked furious. It wasn't like that. Then what was it like? I demanded. Because from where I'm standing, you are the same selfish bastard you've always been, expecting me to clean up after you. Then something inside me cracked. I turned to my parents, shaking with rage. All those years, you told me I had to be the responsible one, that I had to work harder because James needed more support. But the truth is, you raised a spoiled, entitled brat who never had to face a single consequence in his life. And now look where that got you. My father stood up, using the cane to keep himself steady. His face was red, furious. We did everything for you, he shouted. I laughed cold and bitter. Everything? You treated me like I was nothing. You pushed me aside so you could spoil him. And now you need me. My mother was crying now, real tears, not guilt, desperation. You have the money, she whispered. You could help. I felt like I had been punched in the gut. Even now, after everything, she didn't see me as a person, just a resource. My fists clenched. I would never be free unless I walked away. So I did. I turned, walked to the door, opened it, and right before I left, I looked back. This was your choice, I said. Not mine. Then I stepped outside, and for the first time in my life, I felt free.